Hello my friends, this is Lindy. Welcome to Magpie Reads and another Friday Reads. This edition is all visual narratives. But before I get to the books that I finished, just a few things about what's been going on with me. Still so much yard work, creative projects. I'm trying to wrap things up because I'm leaving on Monday for a week-long trip, going to Vancouver for the Writers' Fest. There's much to be done. I'm always busy. Last week, I didn't mention, we went to a Mavericks concert. That was so much fun. I'll use a clip of traveling over the North Saskatchewan River on transit to get there, to give you a bit of a look at the city of Edmonton. I'm still working on the ongoing online printmaking course, and I've been doing experiments with black walnut dye. I still have grapes to make into juice before Monday, get that frozen, and it's never a dull moment. Anyway, we are going to get to the books. 2 of these are kids' picture books, 3 are graphic narratives for adults. 2 of the books are by Indigenous creators, and 2 of them are fiction, 3 are non-fiction, and as I said, all of them are visual narratives, and all of them are 4-star reads for me. Some more like 4.5. So I'm starting strong and going strong all the way through. I'm going to start with the picture book biography of Luz Jiménez. She's a Nahua woman from Mexico who did so much to save her native language, the Nahuatl language. The Child of the Flower Song People, subtitled Luz Jiménez, Daughter of the Nahua. It's written by Gloria Amescua, and the illustrations are by Duncan Tonatiuh. And the illustrations are inspired by pre-Columbian art, and that works just so well for this. Lots of bright colors. This image on the cover is actually from a famous painting that was done by Fernando Leal, with Jiménez was the model. And there are other illustrations inside that are based on famous paintings. This one's one by Diego Rivera. Some of the other artists that are mentioned in here include Tina Modotti. There's Tina Modotti, there's Diego Rivera, and Jiménez making sure that aspects of her culture are not forgotten. The first time that I heard of Tina Modotti was in Rebecca Solnit's book, Orwell's Roses. So it was kind of cool to see her mentioned here again, and I was very happy to learn about Luz Jiménez. Oh yeah, there was another thing. When she went to school, she was forced to speak Spanish. The story of Indigenous peoples all over the place. And the second Indigenous book that I read this week is Carpe by Nicoll Yahgulanaas. Now, and he is a Haida artist and creator. And I picked this up because Sean the Book Maniac mentioned it on his channel. I had previously read several other books by Yahgulanaas, but not this one. So Thanks, Sean, for reminding me that it's out there. It was on my TBR. Now I'm so happy that I read it. No, it's called a prequel to Red, the Haida manga, and it's been so long since I read Red that I can't see where the connection is between those two books. So I think I'm going to pick up Red again. I recently went to a comics art exhibit at the Art Gallery of Alberta, and Yahgulanaas's Red was shown in its full form. If you take every page out of the book and you can put it together into a huge mural. So I'll pop in a photo of that so you can see what I'm talking about. He draws on Japanese as well as traditional Haida imagery for his storytelling. And in this one, Carpe sees the end. He plays with time so much. Like, for example, we see a ship from a previous century, I don't know, 16th or 17th century. We see true things like the sinking of a ferry, the sinking of a tugboat that was pulling a cargo of oil, and the story starts out with environmental devastation. The oil spill has destroyed the food source for the people on this island community on the west coast of Canada. Yeah, there's all these layers of storytelling. So anyway, so the people have to set off in their big canoe to a sacred island, I think it's called the Lord's Rock, to get some food. And the main characters are two friends, Carpe, the carpenter, and Gotcha. And if you think of the Latin Carpe sees and his friend Gotcha, so much playfulness in this book, and that's just one example of the many layers. We're talking about fuel as dinosaur sauce, dino sauce. Anyway, there's also all these layers of West Coast indigenous storytelling. So drawing on old traditions, like when Carpe gets left alone on this island, when a storm comes up, a supernatural being calls to him, and he ends up under the ocean, where this guy who's large and in charge tells him, "We are a civilized people. We have a dress code. It requires that you be clothed and finned." But somehow getting a whale fin into his back is not so easy for Carpe. Later on, he gets stitched into a sea lion skin. That brought back imagery from Eden Robinson's trilogy, the Trickster trilogy. So the more you read books from a certain tradition or part of the world, the more connections you can make. And I'm sure that for Haida people, there's way more that I don't know about that you can find in this graphic novel. But it's definitely got themes of overconsumption of natural resources and how we all need to work together, and that we have responsibility, we have interdependence, not only between humans, but between humans and the natural world and the supernatural world. Really fun, and with a serious message as well. Next up, now I like to do this sometimes, where I'll read a French children's picture book and then compare it to the English translation. So that's what I did with Au-delà de la forêt. In English, on the other side of the forest. This is by a couple of Canadian creators. Nadine Robert wrote it, and the illustrator is Gérard DuBois. He was originally from France, but he lives in Canada now. It's a story about overcoming fears and also about working together. So I like that connection with Carpe and this one. The art style is very retro. It reminds me of like 50s and 60s offset printing. They're animals who are dressed up as humans. And an interesting thing is the family that's at the center is simply a father and his son. No women at all. So if you're a gay father, might especially be interested in that aspect of this book. At first I was wondering if there was going to be any women at all in it, but sure enough, later on when the tower that they're building is destroyed by a big storm, the whole village comes together to help, and there are women who are hauling lumber. There's a woman working with a man on either side of a bucksaw. So yes, definitely women are there too in this story. Some aspects of it, like this scene, this kind of reminds me of Richard Scarry, where there's lots of stuff going on. If you're not a picture book aficionado and you don't know Richard Scarry, think Pieter Bruegel. Let's get to the old Flemish artists. Anyway, so one of the things that I noticed about the difference in the translation is in the English translation, more is explained, and there is a word that I don't think there is an English translation for, but I loved seeing that. And it was in a passage where the boy, whose father has been baking bread all night, "When I wake up, our house is filled with the smell of toasty bread." And the French version, they talk about la bonne mie chaude, mie, M-I-E, and that means the inside, soft part of the bread, the part that's not the crust. And that has a particular scent, sort of yeasty, a little bit sweet, but it's different from the toasty smell of the crust. So, I mean, I think that the translator, Paula Ayer, did a good job of translating that. But it's just an example of the small differences that there are. And slightly different trim size on the book. The French version is slightly bigger, and even decisions like the English version has got a pale end paper, and the French has chosen a red, and I think that those also give a different feel to the book. One thing I noticed at the end, I don't want to show you what the last image is, but somebody has added their own marginalia saying "et après" and "after," because you're left with perhaps a bit of a question at the end of this book. My next two books are both graphic nonfiction, starting with this memoir, I Was Their American Dream. Malaka Gharib has a mother who's Filipina and a father who's Egyptian. She grew up in Cerritos, California, in an immigrant community where almost everybody around her was brown. She has an amusing way of talking about making sense of her identity with a Muslim father and a Christian mother from different parts of the world. And It just so happens that I recently read another story about a Filipino family. America is Not the Heart by Elaine Castillo. I talked about that recently. And also, If an Egyptian Cannot Speak English by Noor. Now, both of those have a lot about being an immigrant, where do I belong, what's my language, what's my culture, and it's like those come together in this, but with lots and lots of humor. One of the things that struck me is that Malaka would tell people who had trouble with her name, it's like Monica with an L. She was used to people at her high school always asking the question, what are you? But when she got a job in Washington, D.C., when she asked people, what are you? She discovered that a lot of people have a problem with that question. And so she spends a few pages talking about how she interviewed people and asked them how they felt about that question. And how for her it was pretty neutral, just being curious about who somebody is, but it's not always viewed that way. And I haven't read this yet, but next up, once I get back from my holidays, is Halina Filipina, which is another Filipino story. This one is a novel in graphic format. It's by Arnold R. And last up, I want to tell you about Seek You, A Journey Through American Loneliness. It's by Kristen Radtke. It is something like an essay or even a series of essays in graphic format. Kristen Radtke also wrote Imagine Wanting Only This, which I also really liked. But so this one, as the title says, it is about loneliness and the difference between being alone and being lonely. I like being alone. I very rarely feel lonely, but it's a topic that really intrigues me. And she covers such things as the way social media both connects and keeps us distant from each other. She talks about the laugh track and how that became popular first on radio and then on television sitcoms. I hate laugh tracks. And I realize it's because I do not like being manipulated. I don't even like certain kinds of music in movies that I can feel is intentionally trying to evoke a certain emotion in me. Which has got nothing to do with this book. But Seek You comes from a ham radio term, that letter C, letter Q, and that's explained in here as well. And she combines her own personal experience with loneliness and her father's as well, because he was a ham radio operator, but also a more general look at loneliness in society today. I've read 2 previous books that also address this topic and that I highly recommend. One is The Lonely Century by Helena Hertz, and the other is The Lonely City by Olivia Lang. And that's all I've got for you today. I look forward to hearing if you have read any of these books, and if you have other thoughts to share with me. Comments are always a joy. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon, because I have 4 or 5 other books that I am so close to the end, and I'm planning to do a recent reads before I leave on Monday. hope I can get that done so that I can start clean with new stuff for my next Friday reads. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.